What secret did you find out about someone that permanently changed the way you looked at them? There is an engineering professional at my workplace that likes to wear pricey articles of clothing. He even sports a Breitling wristwatch, priced from $3,000 to over $17,000, as his work timepiece. Turns out that he and his wife are buried beneath a mountain of credit card debt, and while I do not look down my nose at him, I definitely view his attire and accessories differently knowing that fact. I can't even imagine having enough money for a watch that costs $1.379709323 plus $64,537. Lol, I work with a bunch of people who drive $70K cars on a $40K salary. They never have one spare dime and it's a fucking crisis every time the car needs maintenance. I learned early on the people with the most money are the ones who don't show it off. It's mostly true so far. There are some exceptions of course, but for the most part I'm a fan of the modest ones. When I worked at the bank, this guy came in an hour or so before closing time. He was driving a 90s Honda and dressed in Dockers and a simple shirt. He was depositing a check for $400K. Turns out he had won the lottery, about $14 million, and this was his yearly check. Looking at him, you'd never guess he's a millionaire. Smart man. There was this one girl I'd known for a long time but wasn't massively close to, who we all thought was being terribly controlled by her boyfriend. She would tell us that he decided when you was allowed to drink, when she was allowed to go out, what she was allowed to do, etc. And that he hid things around the house, and that he had started to impose bedtimes for her and shout at her over what seemed like extremely minor things. We all thought he was awful and encouraged her to leave. Then she moved in with me and I realized she was extremely emotionally unstable and an alcoholic. Within months, I found myself wanting to do, or in some cases actually doing, all the things she said her controlling boyfriend had done. I remember one time after trying to remain patient with her for a while, she said one thing that was relatively minor and it was the last straw. I just snapped and screamed at her. I then got phone calls from all our mutual friends to talk about my behavior and anger management, presumably as a result of the story being told back to them in a somewhat biased way. So, in a way, her secret changed my opinion of him. Edit. Didn't expect this to gain traction and the ex-boyfriend is picking up more sympathy than he deserves below. So to make myself feel better about that, I'll add a few more details. While I did gain an understanding of much of his controlling behavior and had a much less black and white view of him and of their relationship, he was no saint. He was very far from it. In fact, for instance, he had been physically violent with her and this was corroborated by others. There were plenty of times I got so angry I felt like raising a hand to her and I walked away to calm down. There is never an excuse to actually hit someone. What I would say is that they were both abusive, but I had a much less black and white view of both of them after getting to know her better. Similar-ish situation I was in. So my sister starts dating this guy. He left his ex for my sister. My sister and I are pretty close, so I hang out with this guy quite a bit while hanging with her. He tells us all these crazy things his ex did and how she was this psycho bitch. So, of course, I'm like, whoa, good on you for leaving, she sounds terrible. Eventually, the guy starts to get super clingy and annoying, showing up at my sister's house randomly at all hours of the night, staying at her house when she goes to work on his days off. They had only been together a couple months at this point and it was too much for her. She breaks it off. Fast forward about 6 months. I'm a groomsman in my buddy's wedding. I really hit off with the maid of honor, bride's cousin. We were chatting before the rehearsal dinner. She seems super cool. End up sitting by her at dinner and laughing and talking the whole night. After I get home, I look her up on Facebook, because I'm a creep. Finally find her page and pull it up. Who do I see in her profile picture with her? My sister's ex-boyfriend. I'm like, what the fuck? Creep on her profile. Definitely her boyfriend. I message her like, dude, you're dating his name. She confirms. Ask for how long. She tells me it's been like 3 years, but they broke up for a few months while he was with someone else and got back together. This chick is the crazy ex-girlfriend. I tell her that the person he was with while they were broken up was my sister. She says she knew already. She knew who I was and apparently was freaking out when her cousin told her I was friends with her husband and would be in the wedding with her. Against my better judgment, I continue being friends with her. She invited me over for a Super Bowl party and a few other get-togethers at her and the boyfriend's place. Start getting closer with this girl and start to see that the guy is actually super controlling and was physically and emotionally abusive. Took everything I had to not knock his teeth in. Eventually convince her to leave him and move in with me just to get away from him. Now, it's 3 years later and we are getting married next year. Crazy roller coaster ride that has been. Wait, so you're sleeping with the girl who used to sleep with the guy who used to sleep with your sister? No, I'm sleeping with the girl who used to sleep with the guy who got a blowjob from my sister. They never slept together. But yay, still weird, haha. Here's a positive one. My wife, a defense attorney, has a work colleague who is the biggest asshole you will ever meet. A blowhard who revels in winning at any cost and brags about the snarky things he does to really twist a knife. He's known as a sharp legal mind, but I get the sense that he likes to try to screw weaker ads or other counselors and loves it when he catches them in some technicality. He makes all those stereotypes about lawyers seem valid. My church had a sort of Habitat for Humanity-esque service weekend where we were rehabbing an old warehouse into a new space as a temporary women's shelter for battered women. The offices were already up, but the individual rooms needed to be refloored, the bathrooms retiled, sheetrock needed to be hung and primed. To my surprise, I saw the asshole there with a tool belt helping to install a sink. Long story short, he donates his legal services to that one shelter, helping to set up restraining orders, divorces, custody, etc. for abused women trying to get away from their abusive partner's family. At first I wondered if this was some sort of court-ordered community service. It wouldn't surprise me if he had done something to deserve it and then pissed off a judge somewhere. But no, the coordinator for the shelter who was working with my church says that he had been doing that for the past few years. Apparently his wife's previous husband was an abuser and he has a real heart for people in that situation. Edit. I don't know if that's really a secret, but my wife didn't know about it and didn't believe me when I told her. He obviously doesn't brag about it, which is something I thought he would totally do. TLDR, asshole attorney actually has a heart. Well, his clients sure don't think he's an asshole if he's an all-star attorney, and they are the only ones he owes anything to at work. The gloating may be asshole-ish, but athletes do it and we barely bat an eye. The guy is just a gunner. The local park homeless alcoholic was once a professor of ancient history and dead languages and could speak and write in languages many of us would never even see. He used to teach at Trinity College until he was convicted for his wife's death. How she died or if he did it is a mystery to me, but one person I've spoken to reckons it was an accident and another says they don't think he did it. Made me see the reality that no matter who you are you could end up in a personal hell. Had a work friend back in the day. His wife was really mean to him. She always would tell me his kids hate him, even though they would run to the door excited when their daddy was home. And when she was really mad at him she would flip out and say that he fucked his sister and fucked a pig. He would just ignore her and not say anything back. Now I just ignored it because she would always try and make him look bad when she was mad at him. Well, one night we were drinking and he was pretty drunk. His wife got mad and did it again, but this time the heated exchange went like this. You fucked your sister and you fucked a pig once. Long pause. You know what? Fuck you. That shit happened like 3 years ago. You need to just drop it and move on. I don't deserve to have it rubbed in my face all the time. Then I realized why she held such resentment towards him and I noped the fuck out of there and never talked to them again. I feel so bad for their kids. It was a really dysfunctional situation for them. Luckily I heard they aren't together anymore. Bahabaha. See, this is why I come to Reddit every day at my boring desk job. You people with your stories always make me laugh like a lunatic. There was a guy I worked with that was kinda handsy, but generally really nice all the time. I learned he was gay, but in the closet. It was then I started noticing how he treated everyone else. kinda douchey. He isn't handsy with anyone else. So all the positive attention was him trying to flirt, I guess. He was not very good at it. I had a conversation with him when he asked me to lunch. I had to awkwardly explain that I am married, etc. I feel like I may have accidentally led him on. I feel a little bad about it, but I wore my ring every day and I have pictures of my family on my desk. We are still on friendly terms and I introduced him to my circle of gay bro friends to help him acclimate to the culture. We became decent enough friends, but a lot of the flirt-like behavior stopped. A family member's ex-wife of several years whom I was still close with asked me never to leave my daughter alone with my relative. She said that the reason they never had kids was that he confided when incredibly drunk that he had uncontrollable desires towards really young girls. He was upset and told her he felt he was evil and deserved to die. She asked him if he ever did anything and he said no and asked her to forgive him and ask God to make him better. Again he was like blackout, intoxicated. This was surprising information. She didn't tell me in spite and actually still loves him very much. I haven't heard or seen evidence of grooming or any extra attention paid to any of the female children in my family. He could have just been really drunk and out of his mind, but there is zero way I'm going to leave my daughter alone with him or let her out of my sight at family functions. I don't have evidence that what she said was true, so I can't really do anything with the information other than be diligent. This is extremely disturbing. It's absolutely the safest decision that they don't have kids. Imagine having kids and then learning this. At least he's self-aware. I feel bad for people like that, because no one chooses what they're attracted to. They can't even confide in other people, so they're left with the burden of carrying a secret that makes them hate themselves. That being said, I don't feel bad when pedophiles are put behind bars. That being said, I don't feel bad when pedophiles are put behind bars, but only if they commit a crime. Having thoughts is not illegal and there should be way more places for these people to get help instead of being shunned and cast out. Completely agree. The problem is that, once a pedophile admits to his urges, it is usually not easy for them to find help due to the stigma surrounding it. They get judged despite fighting their urge and despite their awareness that it is something that can be harmful. I think admitting it to yourself and to other people and taking steps to better yourself must take incredible strength, but I suppose it's easy for the idea to leave people with an icky feeling. Germany started a program where pedophiles that haven't acted on it are able to see therapists, admit it, and they'll be put onto a program that is, in effect, secret. Therapist tells nobody. Normally a therapist is obliged to report a patient to the police if they believe someone is at risk, either themselves or others. They don't have to tell anyone. They get the help without the stigma. There was an interesting article on the BBC about this recently. A guy who described himself as non-contact hated himself and attempted suicide at least once. Kinda makes you think, what other crazy stuff is going on inside people's heads that they have to endure their whole lives? To help the pedophiles who are actually wanting to get help, it would be great if people started calling child molesters for child molesters, not pedophiles. Often child molesters are not pedophiles, but sick opportunists, and they give the pedophiles, who want to seek help, a bad name. Sorry, just need to point it out, since this is a big pet peeve of mine. Pedophiles are in so much need of help, but they have no chance to get it when society is putting them in the same box as child molesters. Of course it is possible that some pedophiles do become child molesters, but those two things aren't exclusive, and people need to realize this, so they can get a chance to seek help and hopefully learn how to live without giving in to the urges. Even those who have offended should be able to get proper help to keep it from happening ever again. Let's spare as many kids as possible from the horrific, traumatizing experience. If he's a gold star pedophile, he needs to be congratulated on that. It must be the worst thing to have feelings like that. It's really sad and I would be diligent with my own children as well, but I'd also feel his pain and help him with his struggles. I just found out yesterday that my wife, 29, a teacher, started an affair with a student, 18, of hers about 2 months ago. We have been together for 10 years and married for 4. We have a 4-month-old daughter and she threw it all away, career, marriage, and family. I had no idea anything was wrong until 6 days ago when I found her crying in bed and she told me she was depressed, no longer in love with me, and suicidal mostly because of my drinking habits. I took sole responsibility, swore off drinking, and had us signed up for marriage counseling the same day, plus got her in contact with a postpartum depression group. 6 days later she is sent to a crisis center by her school and I find out everything after the psychiatrist there makes her tell me the truth when I show up to bring her home. My life is so fucked right now that I can't even sleep and I'm holding a 4-month-old baby trying not to cry while her cheating mother is 5 miles away in a hospital room. Safe to say I will never see my wife the same way again. Dude, firstly, I am so sorry for the situation you are in. However, you need to be strong and cut her out of your life. 1. Go to a lawyer ASAP. Explain your situation and how to proceed. You have been married for 10 years and you have a child together, it's going to be difficult. 2. Leave the house immediately. Don't stay around for her to guilt trip you or create a scene. The police will take her side if they're called. I have been told that this is extremely bad advice. 3. Find evidence of her infidelity. This will be important in court when you are fighting for custody. 4. Do you have family near you? Father, mother, brother, sister, cousin etc.? Leave your daughter with them for a few days while you do this. 5. Never talk with her or be near her without some sort of witness, either in public or somewhere that has cameras. I'm sorry for being blunt, but you are in danger of losing everything, including your child. I wish you all the best. Thanks for the advice. I need all I can get. It's difficult to even process what needs to happen. I plan on contacting a lawyer today if only for advice. The good news is we don't have a house. We are renters, so I'm just one broken lease away from that ordeal and my parents have plenty of space to hold up my daughter and I while we get things sorted. Her parents are going to be picking her up from the hospital today. They are supportive of me and are glad I have the baby. Evidence of the infidelity should be easy to come by because her school found out also and put her on administrative leave. I wasn't exaggerating when I said she threw her career away. She will never teach again after this. My parents are staying with me and the baby at my apartment for the time being. The good news is we don't have a house. We are renters, so I'm just one broken lease away from that ordeal and my parents have plenty of space to hold up my daughter and I while we get things sorted. That's really good to hear. Evidence of the infidelity should be easy to come by, because her school found out also and put her on administrative leave. I wasn't exaggerating when I said she threw her career away. She will never teach again after this. My parents are staying with me and the baby at my apartment for the time being. Why would she throw it all away for 2 months with a kid? Boggles my mind. She's lucky he's 18, or she would be facing jail time right about now. I'm wishing you all the best, man. Please DM me if you ever need emotional support or just want someone to talk to. She did it because the postpartum and because she can't deal with real-life baby, husband responsibilities etc. etc. Crazy defense. Even if he is 18, if he is still her student, it's against the law, as she has influence over him. As a lawyer, you should fight like hell for sole custody. She abused her position as a teacher to sleep with a student, even though he was 18. She has admitted to being depressed and her decision-making capabilities are obviously diminished. Furthermore, she no longer has her viable source of income. You may get out of alimony by arguing it is her fault for her career downturn. File an order of protection for the sake of your child. Depression and stressful times can make people do stupid things. Also, find out how and when she was cheating. Did they have the affair at a hotel? In a car? In her classroom? These details can matter. Remove her name from any joint accounts and fake yours off any credit card she has access to. Fight like hell, man. Hi, lawyer here. The only bit of that advice that is recommended is getting an attorney ASAP and then following their advice. Also, if you want to keep custody of that kid, don't fucking touch that alcohol. Bad advice. Do not leave the house. In the event of a breakup or separation, this will be seen as forfeiting the house. Yet, that's really stupid advice. Also, 3. Find evidence of her infidelity. This will be important in court when you are fighting for custody. In most states this won't matter at all. Most states are no-fault divorces only. Edit. I should say in many states. It doesn't look like the majority of them are no-fault yet. But I know when I went through this my state was a no-fault only, so the fact that she cheated didn't matter at all. 2. Leave the house immediately. Don't stay around for her to guilt trip you or create a scene. The police will take her side if they are called. Bad advice. Leaving a marital asset could hurt you in negotiations. What the attorney tells you to do. 3. Find evidence of her infidelity. This will be important in court when you are fighting for custody. For custody? Nope. Custody is always in the best interest of the child, and it is very rarely anything other than some form of joint custody. You would need documented child abuse or drug addiction to get you help here. 4. Do you have family near you? Father, mother, brother, sister, cousin etc.? Leave your daughter with them for a few days while you do this. Do not do this. This will look like bad faith in custody arrangements. 5. Never talk with her or be near her without some sort of witness, either in public or somewhere that has cameras. Mediocre advice, at best. The only good bit of advice here is talking to a divorce attorney. Go with their advice on how to proceed across the board. They know the jurisdiction very well and what will and will not harm your overall negotiations. I don't know where you're located, but if you need some pizza and are in the US, we're here for you. There was a woman, whom I considered my friend for many years. She had cancer, survived it, but it was still there and created many problems. She even appeared on TV shows as an advocate for cancer patients, did a lot of political activism, was very much opposed to euthanasia, published some books. Then one fine day, through a series of coincidences, it turned out that her cancer had never existed. She had completely made it up. A big fat whopping lie. I would feel ashamed because I fell for it for so long, except that a lot of other people fell for it too, including professionals, doctors, nurses, priests. Needless to say, it ended that friendship, and it made me think a lot about how easily fooled we all are. Oh, by the way, she has died by now, of cancer. I'm not kidding. Not the cancer she had made up, of course. Karma can be such a bitch. Oh, by the way, she has died by now, of cancer. I'm not kidding. Not the cancer she had made up, of course. Karma can be such a bitch. Holy shit, karma sucker punched her into an early grave. Did she do it for the money or the attention? How did she trick the doctors for so long? I would feel ashamed because I fell for it for so long, except that a lot of other people fell for it too, including professionals, doctors, nurses, priests. I know this question is not answerable, but how would doctors believe her? There was this guy in my high school who was the typical big meathead football player bully, picking fights, playing mean-spirited pranks, super homophobic and misogynistic. He was something straight out of a teen movie. My senior year he ended up in my English class. At the end of the year we had to do senior statements, which basically are speeches where you talk about a very painful life-changing event you've been through. He got up and began to tell a heart-wrenching story about how he and his brother have been abused by his father since they were children. He hates football and wishes he could do drama like he wants, but his father would never allow it. He acknowledged what an asshole he is and was besides himself for not knowing how to treat others. He quietly went back to his seat where he proceeded to cry quietly for the remainder of the class. His story radically changed my opinion of him. He was the first person who made me realize most people do deserve compassion. He still lives in my hometown and occasionally I find him at the bar downtown. He's a good guy, much quieter now, but hopefully pursuing something he loves because he deserves the happiness. My boyfriend years ago told me he was abused as a kid by his gay uncle, his actual uncle's partner, yet saw him as usual because he didn't want it to affect the family, and I had to be nice. 8 few months after he told me, he got drunk and in an argument with his dad yells it so everyone could hear. We broke up not long after. Last I heard his dad was looking for blood and the ex-uncle was in jail. My GF was abused by some of her family members but she refuses to say anything about it as it will destroy the family. I hate going to her family's social events because I then meet the people who abused and I have to be nice to them even though I want to strangle the fuck out of them. I don't know how my GF does it as well. Brainwashed that the family is more important. It's not kids. Fuck the family. Yet, when someone decides to rape a child and the family covers it up, that ain't no family. Dad was looking for blood and the ex-uncle was in jail. That's actually really good to hear. There was a thread about this yesterday on here about why people don't go home for the holidays and a lot of people listed pedophile family members being the reason why. So many families cover this up because they don't want to break the family apart. F that. If this was in my family I'd be looking for blood too. If this was one of my kids, geez, I'd probably be in jail. Not necessarily a secret but, I was 8 years old, it was Christmas, and our family was over at a friend's acreage for Christmas Eve. I was sitting on my dad's lap, and I placed my hand up against his to compare size, and to my utter shock and horror, I noticed that my dad was missing a finger, his pinky finger. My mom and dad were confused. You never noticed that? He's been missing his finger your entire life? No, I hadn't ever noticed it, and it was actually a bit too much to handle for an 8-year-old at the time. I was absolutely devastated. In actuality, he lost his thumb while working on the oil rigs, and they transplanted his pinky finger to where his thumb would be, so that he still had some sort of grasping abilities. Pretty cool, but freaked me out so badly as a kid. Had an ex, he was one of those I am so gentle and kind you I love pastel colors and flower crowns you types, who went on to date a friend of mine. This friend goes on to tell me they broke up because he admitted to getting sexual with his dog on multiple occasions and asked if my friend wanted to watch him jack off their dog on Skype call. I was like, shit dude, I just broke up with him because he was fucking annoying. Brother, best friend and best man in my wedding, all of a sudden moved to Washington about a year and a half ago. We have no ties there, and neither does he, and we just couldn't figure it out, but whatever, maybe he wants a new start. Then all of a sudden he moves back to the town my parents live in. Last Thanksgiving the US Marshals showed up to take him into custody and to send him back to Washington. He's facing trial next month on illegal touching of a minor amongst many other charges. Definitely has changed the way I look at him. Sibling set of cousins, my third cousins, 2 sisters and a brother. The youngest sister, she is 31 this year, this happened in about 2009-ish, was dating a mixed-race guy, one parent black, the other white. I didn't realize how racist the family was. They told her to leave him immediately, and when they found out she not only hadn't left him but was also now having sex with him, her siblings beat her up while their father watched, and they forced her onto a plane to the EU the next day, black eye and all. Had her personal documents seized by her sister and was basically a prisoner to her. I found out about a year later about this when our other cousin told me. I can never look at anyone in that family again the same way, and it's so sad because as a kid I was very fond of them. The older sister had a coffee shop which my dad used to take us to a lot, and I think that's where he met my stepmom. I am not sure if this is a secret now since my mom knows and I didn't tell her. Though at the time my cousin asked me to keep it quiet because it was top secret and very sensitive information. I don't know if any of the family know that I know about this as well. If any of them ever read this, you guys suck. Reddit makes me very depressed knowing there is horrible people out there in the world. Yet, it also makes me very thankful for my family and my upbringing. Some people have it really bad. I met a friend's new boyfriend who told me that he had spent time in jail for 2 DUIs. He got a DUI, and then he got another one, and the judge gave him jail time. He drank a lot, but when I met him he was at least very careful about not driving. But to be honest, I judged him for it. Pretty shit to drive drunk. And how do you get 1 DUI and then not learn your lesson? It was something that affected the way I saw him. Fast forward 3 years, and now he is married to my friend. One night I am out with my friend, and she makes a comment about his sister. I had heard that he had a sister who died, but I never knew the details. Turns out she was a victim of a violent bloody murder by an ex-boyfriend, and my friend's husband is the one who found her body. Walked into the house coming home from college for summer break and found her. The DUIs were in that first 6 months after her death. Should he have been driving drunk? No, of course not. But after I learned that, I had so much compassion for him and the terrible pain he must have been going through. People deal with such terrible things, and they don't always deal with them well. My best friend's brother-in-law kept getting sore throats for months. His normally soft-spoken mother, fed up by this time, screamed at him in front of a full house, "What do you expect if you keep eating that dirty pussy?" Later that day I found out that both he and his GF were dirtballs. He showered about once a month and she would only wash her face, hands, and feet. They are both very attractive, educated, athletic, church-going people, and all I can think of is her pussy is so rotten it's contagious, and this motherfucker catches it with his mouth. I just imagined mushrooms growing down there and almost hurled. Suffice to say, I won't be sleeping tonight. I had a guy in my D&D gaming group with a smock and red-headed girlfriend. All of us thought the redhead was gorgeous, but, you know, guy code, until it was revealed that the slightly annoying but tolerated power gamer of the group made it clear that he thought he was next in line to date the redhead if guy number 1 left the picture. Utterly destroyed our gaming group. Redhead thought it was hilarious in our sad cringe kind of way and hurt his feelings, and I personally, as the dungeon master, was aghast that a human being's mind could operate that way. Like, dude, she's not a friggin' carnival prize. I couldn't stand to play or even speak to him anymore, but it was pretty clear he wasn't coming back anyway. Good riddance. Wait, so what did your friend's girlfriend say to him? And what was his reaction? It all came out at a party, in a chat about relationships. She just simply laughed at him and said she'd never get together with him regardless of how things turned out with her and so. His reaction was simply to swallow his pride for the rest of the night, but the consequence was immediate. We never gamed with him again after the party. I'm not entirely sure you're not talking about me. This happened to me, a decent-looking redhead who was in a D&D group that dissolved because someone had a weird sense of entitlement to me, despite the fact that I had a boyfriend who was also in the group. I am also a decently looking redhead that went through this same situation. Is it really this common? I work at a trucking company. One day, the other girl who works in the office with me and I were talking about which drivers were our favorites. I mentioned this one kind of cantankerous old veteran who was cranky to 90% of the people but always a sweetheart to me, and the other girl's face went pale. She said, "You haven't Googled his name then, have you?" I Googled it, and found out he had been arrested for sodomy when he worked at a prison years ago, and that he had flown Nazi flags outside his house. I mean, I knew he was far-right leaning politically, but, wow. I'm still nice to the guy, but also low-key kinda terrified of him. Similar situation. Work at a trucking company, cleaning up HR files and noticed one didn't have background checks attached. Ran one and oops, found out the friendly and honestly kind of attractive driver is a rapist, victim under 12 years. Can't stand the sight of him anymore and due to privacy issues, can't warn anyone. Wow, that's crazy. What is it with trucking companies and not running background checks? I swear half my coworkers have criminal records, and not that I mind, they get the job done. but that shit wouldn't fly in retail, engineering, any other field I've worked in. Employment demand is high. Where I am, 8/10 job listings are for truckers. There's this really young Sikh kid who clerks in all-night gas station nearby, where I buy my coffee. The other night, when I went in, nobody was at the counter and 3 people were waiting. One guy eventually started knocking random doors, and this kid came out, looks like he's about 17, at the one-room bathroom in the place. About a minute later, as I'm being served, this really old security guy came out of the same bathroom, glanced at me looking shifty, and then scurried off into the night. This town is gross. I was dating my boyfriend that would eventually become my husband and father of my child when we decided to move in with his parents for financial reasons. On our last trip from our apartment to their house with our stuff, at a 4-way stop, he says my mom cheated on my dad. Now the act of cheating wasn't all that surprising or shameful considering his parents had been together since they were 15 and had their first child at that age. I didn't judge, but there were 2 parts of the story that made me change my view. 1, who she cheated with. It was her husband's nephew. They were adults when it occurred, but the nephew was the same age as her oldest son, who was 14 years older than my boyfriend, which meant that she had been around this kid from the time he was born and her oldest son was super close to. 2, my boyfriend found this out from his cousin, younger sister of nephew, when he was 12 and confronted his mom, who admitted everything and guilt-tripped him into never telling his dad. So, he had kept that secret for nearly 15 years at the time. Now, it has been about 8 years since, and we lived with his parents for 2 years. In that time I learned that his mom just plain likes to keep secrets from his dad, such as the credit cards she took out in his name to pay for boyfriend's debt, and the money she continued to funnel him. I learned she liked to have little whisper sessions about this with my boyfriend and it grossed me out. I learned that she relies heavily on emotional fulfillment and gratification from her sons in a weird and almost reverse openness type way. All of this compounded onto what I had been told in her character was officially enough to make my skin crawl. Boyfriend and I ended up divorced around 1.5 years into our marriage, and, truth be told, a lot of it had to do with her. My view of him started to change. I lost respect for him and his acceptance of the coddling. Our relationship deteriorated. We now have a beautiful son and a pretty good co-parenting relationship. He is remarried and will never tell his wife of his mom's indiscretions. He will hold on to that secret forever. His dad and older brothers will never know what he's had to keep inside for 20+ years now, and my heart still breaks for him for it. I'm sorry to be blunt, but your ex-husband is crazy, and I mean that in the politest way possible. How can he talk with his dad on a regular basis and allow his mother to sleep around all these years? I just can't wrap my head around it. The utter betrayal. He robbed his father of a better life and a better partner. When it does come out, and it will eventually, it will utterly destroy him. Not really change my views toward one person, but made me think differently overall towards a whole part of society. I worked a construction job with a small company during college. One of the guys I worked with, let's call him Dave. Dave was very quiet and usually kept to himself but knew how to do just about anything. Framing, tool repair, finish work, you name it, he knew how to do it. After the initial introductions and a few weeks of work, he warmed up to me and we got along well. After working for a few months, he didn't show up at work one morning. This was strange, because Dave was never late. After talking to some of my other coworkers, I found out that Dave was a Tier 2 sex offender and that he had, as part of his sentence, to submit to random dwelling searches. I honestly was blindsided by this, as I never would have guessed that he had a criminal record. This changed my views on ex-cons almost 180. I majored in criminal justice and was in class with future cops and corrections officers. The attitude toward convicted felons was that they are unredeemable and will offend again. I bought into that mode of thinking, as many college students do with no real-world experience. After seeing Dave work and hearing him talk, it was obvious that he realized his mistakes and was making a huge effort to make things right. Being nosy, I looked up his conviction when I got off work that day. The crime was bad, but it was non-violent and had happened a decade or so before I met him. The next day everyone went on working, but I found a deeper respect for Dave, and I learned that a person is not the sum of their past mistakes. My formerly favorite aunt was jealous of my relationship with her son, my younger cousin. He has always been like my little brother and I was his go-to person for everything. While arguing with him, she accused us of having a sexual relationship, in way more derogatory language, because why else would we be so close? Never mind him basically being raised in my home and me always babysitting. Done? I hope it was just for shock value, but I was disgusted that she would stoop so low to hurt him and me in turn. I told my mother about it and she doesn't believe her sister would say something like that. We must have misunderstood her. I don't see how you can misunderstand what that bitch said, but whatever. When my ex cheated on me after a relationship of 5 years, I was devastated, but despite everything I was willing to give her another chance. I still loved her so much. During that time I talked to my mom a lot. I voiced my concerns on how I thought I'd never be able to trust her again. That is when she told me my aunt had an affair, probably to console me. My aunt and uncle had always been this really nice couple to me, but it seems like I was wrong. They worked it out, but I can't see them any differently anymore. I somehow see her more evil and him a little bit of a victim. Went to a wedding of a family friend who was marrying a British guy, met his son and later on ended up visiting London not too long after and thought it was strange that he never wanted to talk about his father or his new stepmother. At some point I bring up how much I like his dad and how I remember the first time I met him 5 years ago, saw my friend's face go white and asked if he was okay. He told me his dad had actually cheated on his mom with his new stepmom, but he'd only found out about it 6 months ago. He didn't know they'd been together for 5 years. I didn't know that my family friend was the other woman. We literally sat in silence for 5 minutes to process each other's information. I see them at least once a month and I can't help but think about it every time I do. When I found out my dad smoked weed, it didn't really change my opinion on him that much. I had thought he might have been a stoner for a few years leading up to the reveal, but finding out he still actively does LSD, shrooms, and occasionally cocaine made our relationship a little bit weirder, especially after tripping with him a few times. I still love him and he's still a great guy usually, but I can't look at him the way that I used to anymore. I could see feeling similarly. Do you feel like the father-son relationship dynamic was broken and you're on the same level now? That's definitely a good way of putting it. At times I even catch myself looking down on him. He's not a terrible person, but now that I'm an adult I see all his flaws, and he tells me some of his hilarious and inappropriate stories of things I would never do, like driving while hammered to get prostitutes. That's one thing that really got to me about becoming an adult, was starting to see the flaws in people I once thought were indestructible. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it kinda messes with your perspective a bit. Also, a bunch of people I knew growing up thought that parents who smoked weed with their kids were so cool. I smoked with my dad like 3 times and couldn't have been more uncomfortable with the whole on the same level, I'm cool with this, you're high let's joke about it thing. I just kept thinking, yeah, I kinda wish I still had to smoke at the park and air out for a while. I don't know if it's a secret, but the gay best friend at my uni is the worst gossip. As in, he'll tell people if you had a miscarriage if you asked him for support but don't want anyone to know about it. He pretends to be everyone's best friend until they leave the room or you're alone with him. He will tear you to shreds. Like, okay, I see you, Ian, I see you. I used to think he was nice or friendly, but really, he's all 4 mean girls combined into one stupid body. I'd love to tell everyone he talks to that he's a gossip and a bitch, but that would put me on his level, wouldn't it? I know this guy who is the awkward engineering type that we all know and love. Like in meetings he will raise his hand if he has something to say, and he'll do stuff like throw a party then tell all the men he invited that it's been cancelled so just a bunch of chicks will come and not have any fun. Well, apparently several years before I met him he lost his virginity to his roommate, who was a man transitioning to a woman. This made him incredibly anti-gay, and now he always tries to project himself as super masculine in social situations. Also clear he has zero self-confidence with the whole raising your hand to speak, and stuff like that. I'm not from America, so I don't know how it's seen there, but what's the problem with raising a hand to talk? Sometimes everyone just wants to talk at once and the hands just help keep it more civil. Found out my friend's boyfriend of 6 years basically started to rape her after they moved in together. She would apparently wake up to him ripping her clothes off, and he would always pressure her into sex. When they broke up, he started dating someone everyone in our town knows is a danger to herself and others. Lost all respect for him, and our friend group completely cut him out. To be honest, we was always a fucking idiot, but we all thought he was a good guy. I always thought that my parents were very against drugs. At one point I learned that my dad actually smoked weed. Not just a little, but he smoked almost every morning and every night. This upset me a lot, but I eventually got over it. Another night, maybe a year or so later, my sister was throwing a party and my mom and I were just going watch a movie in the other room or something. I was fairly young, maybe 13 or 14 at the time, so I wasn't into partying yet, but instead she decided to go and party with my sister's friends whilst I stay in my room and watch the movie alone. I later come out of the room to go to the bathroom or get a drink or something, and lo and behold, my mom is in the middle of smoking a bowl. It really changed the way I think of my parents, and it makes me laugh anytime they give my older brother, who's 23, shit for smoking pot. I had a friend who was always moderately teased for being easy slutty, and I know she meant well, but she enjoyed the male gaze. Gorgeous girl, too tall, blonde hourglass figure and striking bluish-green eyes, so that alone seemed to play into the rumors. We had a weird correlation with attractiveness equals sluttiness in school, but anyways, one day she confided in me that she was molested on multiple occasions as a small child by a neighbor who routinely told her that she was only good for sex. So even though I joke about her being slutty, in a playful manner, unlike our classmates, now I really can't bring myself to see a attention-hungry girl as I naively used to sometimes. I really just see a girl whose innocence was taken far too early and was going through life understanding men the only way she knew how. I've a very close family member who for years had an extremely estranged relationship with their family. They've behavioral issues, a drinking problem, though this is something that no one acknowledges. We are very healthy like that. They've quit this now. This person moved between nostalgia and hatred of their family and was disowned by their family. From their behavior and Jekyll and Hyde personality, I often suspected this, but I was told by them nearly 2 years ago that they were sexually and emotionally abused by their parents. I knew it, yet in that moment, I forgave them a lot of wrongs they've done to me, lot of abuse done to me. Essentially, they're a wonderful person who is trying to rectify and change themselves. World is moving on, and they're getting older. Being older means vulnerability. Vulnerability reminds them of being a small scared child with the two people in the world they care about the most and should be able to love and trust implicitly, being the two people who hurt and hate them most. My heart breaks at this fact. It made me look at them differently. One of my family's friends is a sex offender. He was convicted of rape long before I was around, did jail time, is on the register, and has to check in every year or something for an updated mugshot. He has a wonderful family, a great job, and he's always been very kind to us. I never would have suspected it. I only found out when I was doing a sex offender search in my area, and got curious about my old hometown. Changes the way I look at him for sure, but he's still a great friend of ours, and it doesn't mean I won't hang out with him anymore.